At this morning's awakening service, we took a look at a passage within the book of Revelation. Fitting for this Reign of Christ Sunday when we talk about God being Alpha and Omega. It was also interesting the conversation that then took place, because if you've not been part of the awakening service, there's the open invitation for come some Sunday morning earlier and join us at 9:15, 9:20, where we'll sing and then have some very interesting conversation, oftentimes about current events. This morning's current event that was discussed, if you've been following the news at all, was a young man who felt compelled to go on a missionary journey to an island inhabited by folks that have been basically very isolated and cut off from the rest of civilization. I hesitate to use that word. The rest of humanity, of their own choosing. But he felt compelled to need to go and share his understanding of the Christian faith, only to meet his demise. It certainly sparked some interesting conversation about where we were on that. I share that, first of all, again, as an invitation to come some Sunday morning a little early and join us at the awakening service. And then I realized that every Advent, I start out, well, it's my New Year's resolution kind of thing, because it's the new year for the Christian church, and next Sunday will be Advent. I start off, choosing to be able to read a book a month. It used to be a book a week, and I've slacked off. I oftentimes will let folks know what I'm reading, so that if you want to read and have conversations about it, I'd welcome that. I'm getting ready to tackle Christianity After Religion. And this is where the subtext of this title might make you a bit nervous, having just called me as your transitional minister. The end of church and the birth of a new spiritual awakening. Let me first of all tell you that even as you have called me, I have no intention of closing down the church. The book is about perhaps the end of things as we have known them, and a reawakening of the Christian ethos of what it means to be followers of Jesus the Christ. I'm going to leave this downstairs if anybody wants to take a brief look at it. If you care to join me during the season of Advent and want to compare notes and have coffee conversations, I welcome that. The end of church and the beginning of a spiritual awakening. How do I want to tie that into the passage that was just read? When Jesus is telling his very earliest followers some rather, what we might interpret as disturbing suggestions. Don't worry about this or that or the other thing. God will provide it all. Sounds rather revolutionary, sounds kind of disturbing. Let's be honest, it sounds cultish in a way. And if we take it literally that way, it could lead to that. And let's be honest, in sometimes it has. When powerful people say, give me all of your possessions and I will be your spiritual guide and you won't have to worry about anything. I've known people that have fallen into that trap, and it's taken a while to extricate themselves out of. That's not what I believe Jesus was intending in this call to his disciples. You see, thinking back, his disciples and the others that he was teaching along the way were used to a religious system that those who had the most wealth, the most power of privilege, first of all, were born into that possibility. But it was a sign in their eyes of God's blessing upon them. If you had great riches, if you had great stature, if you had great position and power and privilege, it's because God wanted that for you. And if you didn't, then it was likely that you or your family had done something wrong at some point and just muddle through life the best you can. I would like to say that that understanding of God has gone by the wayside 2,000 years later, but there are still traditions out there that see that if you are truly rich and truly blessed with great possessions, it is a sign of God's favor for you. And that if you don't, if you're living on the edge, if you're living on the margins, if life's not completely coming together, then certainly it is your fault or you have done something wrong. It's an understanding, a dual, a head-to-head, a competitive understanding of God. The character and the nature of God, God's desire for God's people. When Jesus is giving these words to his earliest followers, I truly believe he is saying, do not get so fixated on the fact that you need to achieve things in order to have God's favor. Jesus was known for turning things on its head. Jesus, as he's talking and teaching to the very earliest people, was saying, it's not what you achieve, it is how you live. It is how you love. I have 2 children. Many of you have met Amanda and Michael. Amanda is my save the world kind of person. She's going to be a social worker. Like her mother, probably won't make a dime. For you social workers out there, that probably rings more true than you care to acknowledge. My son Michael is in college prep for business and is already, as we're doing college visits, wants to go into entrepreneurship. Doesn't mean because my daughter wants to save the world by being a social worker, she's all right. And because Michael wants to go into entrepreneurship, I think he's watched too many Shark Tank episodes, but neither here nor there, that he's wrong. It's what they choose to do with those things that make the difference. I have permission to share a story from a friend of mine. I've been talking to her on a regular basis the last several months. She's going through a very difficult divorce. She's finally taken the courage to leave a very abusive situation. And she found herself for the very first Thanksgiving that she can recall by herself. She wasn't sure exactly what to do, and I invited her to come and hang with us, except that we were heading down to Virginia for the holiday. I said, but you know, when I found myself alone before I was married and children, I went and volunteered at a community meal. She went and she did that. She went and she served others. I had the conversation with her this morning before church, and she was like on cloud 9 because not only did she find great joy in going and serving others, it took her mind off of her own worries, and then her family descended upon her this weekend from out of state, and they moved all the rest of her stuff out of the house, and she said, I then felt guilty about everything that I had accumulated. First, I gave her special dispensation to no longer feel guilty about anything. But then simply processed and said, so as you move forward, forget about accumulating all of these things. But go back to the feeling that you had as you were serving others. That's a reminder for myself sometimes. I'd love to be able to say that the person behind the pulpit has it all figured out. If you sat on the search committee that called me here, you already know that's not the case. For those of you who have got to know me over the course of this month, you've already figured out I don't have it all figured out. I'm still living into this journey of life and faith, as are the rest of you. And I need each and every one of you. Just as I hope you look around and realize you need each other. It may not be serving a community meal together, but we are called to be reminded of living into the reign of Christ and the world that God desires, and not the craziness and the hecticness. Is that a word, Chrissy? You're going to sit right there. You're going to be my target for this morning. I make up words all the time, by the way. If you are English teachers or were at one time, feel free to fact check me afterwards and put me on the right. The end of church and the birth of a new spiritual awakening is not meaning the end of gathering together. It means rethinking, re-evaluating, reimagining, reclaiming what it means to be Christian community. To be able to be here to remind one another what's truly important in life. Last Sunday, we together as church celebrated the sacrament of now our very youngest. And within that sacrament, we made covenant to nurture and to love through the entirety of his life. You've made that covenant with others in this church. And whether you were baptized here or not, when you become part of this church, you covenant with one another to see each other through the darkest of times and the times of greatest joy. And I think we covenant together to remind each other what's good in this life and what's distracting. I already gave you a commercial for starting next week, these table talk conversations. I see these as opportunities for us to not only share with one another those things that are important to us, but to also be able to remind ourselves of who we are and who we are called to be in the face of what sometimes other distractions in the world may call us to be. I envision this church being a place of hope and peace and joy, and above all, love. Not only for those that we are already covenanted with, but as I looked out last night at the amazing number of people that kept coming down the street from City Hall through the marshy, mucky grass to then celebrate and to sing, for us to be that to those that we don't even know yet, who may still yet sit around here. Like some stories, if you've heard it several times, you may tune out. I want to leave you with this snippet. It's one that I have come to take to heart. It's been around for a while. You probably have seen it on Facebook memes. You have probably even seen it on posters. Some of you have heard it ad nauseum. You may check out now, or you may hear it again for the first time. An old Cherokee chief was teaching his grandson about life. "A fight is going on inside me," he said to the boy. "It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, lies, false pride, superiority, self-doubt, and ego. The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside of you," he told his grandson. and inside of every other person, too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, which wolf will win? And for those of you who have heard this illustration, answer for me and for the rest of us. Which wolf wins on that fight? The one you feed. The one you feed. May we as a community of faith be for each other the ones to feed the good and positive nature of our Christ selves, and now allow ourselves into the darkness and the tumult of what competes with it. That is my hope, even as I read the end of the church and the birth of a new spiritual awakening. Whether you choose to read or not, I ask you to envision and to dream and to journey with me in the days ahead. Thanks be to God.